I've been with the department here for just about 3 months now. I've come from Illinois originally from a family farm. I went to the University of Illinois for both my doctorate in veterinary medicine as well as my master's in public health. And then before coming to Iowa, I was in Washington, D.C., working for city government as their public health veterinarian for just shy of the last 4.5 years. So I'll start us out here with a brief just introduction on our foreign animal disease response and preparedness here in Iowa. Now, what I've been telling all the groups that I've started and gone around with meet everything, I'm hoping everyone just only deals with me on a theoretical basis with trainings and everything like that. But just want everyone to know that we're hoping for the best, but we are preparing for the worst, is what you have to think about with these foreign animal disease responses. In Iowa, the legal authority to the Department of Agriculture is with our Code Chapter 163, and that gives us, as we saw with avian influenza that will be touched upon later, the authority to control and eradicate any highly contagious regulatory diseases. So that's where foreign animal diseases would fall in. To do so, this allows us to quarantine, to regulate and prohibit animal movements, as well as enter farms and premises when we need to do investigations. Now, just to kind of set the background a little bit, in Iowa here, as many people well know since they're here at Pork Congress this year, we raise about a third of the nation's hogs. When there's about 20 million pigs in Iowa at any given time going through our production systems. We're the #1 pork producing state and exporter, and in 2015 that contributed $13.1 billion to our state economy. And Iowa also houses about a fourth of the slaughter capacity. So the map here at the bottom corner of the screen, that just kind of shows the density of hog farms in the United States. And as you can kind of see, that gets more and more concentrated as we come to Iowa, which serves as the hub for the industry. Now, when outbreaks happen, as we saw with avian influenza, it becomes kind of a balancing act between the state's needs, the federal government's needs, and the producer's needs. So we can kind of set the stage of this before the outbreak, but once things happen, this relationship can get a little bit skewed in one direction or the other. But I just want to kind of reiterate that everyone's working together because our #1 goal is to keep our herds here in the U.S. healthy and free of disease. Now, our response during a foreign animal disease outbreak is, #1, we want to detect the disease as quickly as possible so we can respond as quickly as possible. Then we want to move into biocontainment, so whichever farms or premises we find it on, we want to keep it contained there. And then we want to eliminate the disease if all possible. What that starts with is most commonly a way to remove those animals that have been infected. And then our overall goal is always to restart movement as quickly as possible. So doing this, we want to find out where the disease is, contain it, and then in the areas where we know it's not, allow that to kind of proceed as normal. So in Iowa, what we really want to stress is if folks suspect there's a foreign animal disease, we want them to report it, and so we can test. A lot of foreign animal diseases, it's very hard it's next to impossible to distinguish just by looking based on clinical signs. So that's why we really want to reiterate that when producers suspect, they need to let their herd vet know, and then they need to contact us so we can make a decision of whether testing is warranted or not. So with a little bit of background about African swine fever, which is the hot button issue right now. So African swine fever was first documented in the early 20th century. It's found, it's such a prolific virus because it's found in all the tissues and bodily fluids of pigs. It's very capable of surviving a long period of time in the environment. It's a long virus, which the reason that's important is because it makes it able to survive longer in the environment. It also makes it harder to create a vaccine for it because there's more different areas to target. With that being said, it does take pig-to-pig transmission, though, so that doesn't have to necessarily be direct pig-on-pig, but that pig has to come in contact with that virus in order to contract it. It's not airborne, and it's not going to be floating around and infecting pigs in that way. It has to be a pig coming in contact with the virus, which historically and in the natural environment is pig-to-pig, but a lot of times now what they're seeing in foreign countries is a person or a vehicle or some object that has been contaminated is bringing that virus into there. The natural hosts for the virus are warthogs and soft ticks. However, I want to note why those are issues. Those could potentially be feral hogs and soft ticks that can carry the virus could be issues for the southern United States. That's not an issue for us here in Iowa. The tick that can carry the virus hasn't been documented well in Iowa, and then we don't have a feral hog issue here like they do in some of the southern parts of the United States. And again, that virus, it's very hardy. It has a very large temperature range it can survive, as well as a large pH range. It's been shown to be able to survive as long as 140 days in salt-cured hams and several years in frozen carcasses. That's why it's important for countries to eliminate garbage feeding practices. So that's not something we allow here in Iowa. So any sort of table scraps or products that could contain pork that might be carrying the virus, we don't allow those to be fed back to pigs. And that's partly how they think that the virus could have potentially spread in some areas of Europe. Now, African swine fever right now, there's a large outbreak occurring in China. As of yesterday, there's reported 107 outbreaks that they've reported to the World Animal Health Organization. And as you can see here, it's spread through a vast area of the country. There's reports that it's in their wild feral hog population that's on the North Korean border, and that just proves an additional challenge because once it gets in the wild hogs, it makes it even harder to eliminate. And again, a lot of this is in their commercial pigs, so that's just kind of shows that its capability of spreading. So these pigs aren't necessarily interacting with each other. It's workers moving between the farms that where they may not have shower and shower out facilities, or maybe trucks or feed trucks or anything like that might be contaminated, carrying that virus to different sites. The clinical signs for African swine fever is, as the name implies, it starts with a high fever, decreased appetite. Pigs can have skin lesions, what looks like rashes on their skins, vomiting, coughing, diarrhea. So pretty nondescript in general. It can look like other things. And this is actually, if pigs are displaying these clinical signs in a barn or on a farm, these are some of the different diseases that they can be displaying. And as you know, some of these aren't even diseases. Some of them can be toxicities, poisonings. So they're pretty nondescript. Some of these are naturally found in the U.S. already, and some of them are foreign animal diseases. But that's why with any suspect clinical signs, we want folks to let their herd vet know right away so they can make an assessment. For prevention and treatment, as I talked about earlier, there's no vaccine for African swine fever. And again, that's because the virus is so large that it just makes it harder to be able to target a certain area to stimulate the body to make those antibodies. There's no treatment, and the number one prevention is biosecurity. So as I talked about before with it taking direct contact with the virus, that's making sure that workers are properly changing clothing, showering in, showering out, and that all the ins and outs are carefully monitored at these hog facilities to make sure that they haven't been somewhere where it's potentially contaminated and then brought in. I also want to note, too, while I'm on this slide, that while the disease can have quite an impact on pigs and it can persist in pork products for quite a while, there's no risk to human health. And that's true of most foreign animal diseases, but yeah, with African swine fever, no risk to human health. There's only a risk to pigs and what it can do to potential the production systems. And again, just to highlight the impact that African swine fever have, here's pictures of some of the clinical signs that pigs can display. So this, imagine that you walk into a barn or on a farm, you kind of see pigs that are displaying this way. This could be any number of things, and just to highlight that, the top picture there, African swine fever, so foreign animal disease. Erysipelas, that's something that can be found in the U.S. PRRS, that can be found in the U.S. too. Classical swine fever, that's something that's a foreign animal disease as well. And then even sunburn for people that aren't used to, if they have hogs that are only inside, that can potentially go outside. But just to highlight again, even when we do investigations at the Department of Health and USDA as well, if we're sending a foreign animal disease investigator to a farm, they're not able to look at the animals and tell exactly what they have. They can come up with a list of conditions like I showed earlier, but they're ultimately going to do testing to determine if there is a foreign animal disease present, and then we will take the appropriate actions once we have that test result. So that just concludes my portion about a little bit of the background here.